Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the first two videos on hybrid cloud where Keith and I covered hybrid cloud for small companies and hybrid cloud for medium-sized companies. Now it's time to talk about the big iron. So be sure that you check out the rest of this video. We're going to talk about hybrid cloud for large companies. Check it out. Let's transition now to talk about large companies. These are people that are fairly sophisticated. They have a lot of infrastructure needs. They really want to scale. And what can hybrid cloud offer these kinds of companies?
Yeah, definitely. Scalability is key. So usually these are organizations that today, if they're running on Hyper-V with Windows Server, they probably have multiple clusters and could be in multiple data centers. And they're probably using tools like System Center Virtual Machine Manager and System Center Config Manager to manage the data center and desktop landscape, right, of those environments. Well, some of the great news is that with System Center 2016, those tools also support hybrid cloud Azure environments and on-prem environments as well. So you have, again, the same tooling for managing your more complex data center and desktop infrastructure and configuration management across those environments. You had mentioned scale. Scale I see in enterprise environments, very large environments, coming in a couple different ways. First, a large portion of what's driving the capital cost in many enterprise environments is storage related. Many people they just don't want to throw away any data. They want to keep it around forever. Yeah. It's hard to get users to give up their data. And that could be data that's sitting at a file system level. It could be data sitting in SQL databases. But there's some really cool ways of being able to leverage and optimize your storage infrastructure on-prem for just the data that you really need fast access to, the data that's most frequently accessed, and then tier off the other data that you still want to keep around, you still want to make accessible, but you don't need to have super fast access to. Tier that off to the cloud storage to make it even more cost effective. And so we've got capabilities, we've got offerings like Store Simple, for instance, that gives you the ability to essentially have a hybrid cloud storage area network. It's an iSCSI based storage array that keeps your hot data hot, local, close to your users in your data center. And then for any data that gets moved to a cold tier, it encrypts it, it compresses it, and it tiers that off to the Azure cloud, where storage is super, super cheap for that cold tier. And if the data gets accessed again, it dynamically pulls it back. So the only thing the users see is a couple extra milliseconds in terms of accessing your data. So that's cool for file system-oriented data that you want to tier off to the cloud. But a lot of that data also exists inside SQL Server databases. And oftentimes what we see when we look at enterprise applications is they have these enormous tables of audit information or historical order information that goes back 7 years, 10 years, 15 years, and they need to keep it around, or they want to keep it around. Well, with SQL Server 2016, we've got this cool new feature called StretchDB that allows you to take those types of tables that have kind of this calendar-oriented, long-reaching information, and pick a point in time and say, okay, I want to keep everything for the last year in these tables in the on-prem SQL database copy, but everything else I want to tier off to Azure into the StretchDB service. And the cool thing is, it requires no application changes. Your application still sees a SQL database, it still sees the same schema, it still sees the same table structure, but when it queries that, SQL automatically issues a hybrid query and combines the results back if it needs to pull any results back from what's been moved out to Azure. So as a result, you can take, with many organizations is 30 to 40% of their capital cost budget for storage, and you can shrink that down and optimize it for really what needs to be hot, and then you can spend that money on more productive aspects, either in your on-prem or in your cloud, your public cloud environment. So storage is a huge area that a lot of enterprise customers struggle with. And then another key area that's more on the application side is the idea of cloud bursting. You know, a lot of enterprise organizations have applications that users access or customers access remotely, mobilely, and in many cases they need to be able to respond quickly to unexpected peaks or surges in demand, either based on time of year, time of month, time of quarter, or just based on increased workloads that they didn't expect. Sort of that Shark Tank effect, right? The company goes on Shark Tank and suddenly everybody wants their product and now their website died. That's the last thing that our enterprise customers want, right? And so by leveraging technologies like Azure Traffic Manager and VM scale sets with auto scale capabilities and Azure Automation for some automated intelligence, which is part of that operations management suite that we talked about a little bit ago, you can create a completely automated end-to-end cloud burst scenario where even if your application continues to live on-prem for 80% of the time, as you hit those peaks in utilization, you can redirect users, spin up cloud workloads for your application, redirect users there, and then when your peaks go back to valleys, spin that all down, save on cost. And the cool thing is you're not paying capital costs for those peak times, so you don't have to worry about over-engineering the cost and complexity of your on-prem data center, but you're also not ignoring those peak times because that, if you do, that can be the inability to service customer or user requests during those peak times can have serious revenue impact, right, on an organization. So it allows you to capitalize on both sides of the ledger from that standpoint by taking advantage of cloud bursting.
Yeah, makes sense. Some really cool stuff you're talking about there. I love, as a previous SQL Server developer, I love the stretch DB. The fact that I don't have to rewrite any code, the database itself can be told, hey, anything that's older than X, put that up in the cloud. And my query to the database stays the same, but my costs and my, the storage costs and management costs are all going to be decreased just by putting old stuff up in the cloud. But I'm not detaching it from my database. I don't have to, go through some special effort to get to that old data. It's still there. It's still connected. It's just a little bit further away, stored in a much less expensive place, available if I need it, but for 99% of the time when I don't, I'm saving a lot of money. And then with the Store Simple technology that you talked about, also very cool stuff. The cost between storage, the storage costs are very different from on-prem to cloud. And like you said, storage is going through the roof. Nobody's deleting anything last time I checked. And so we've got all this data, and we've got backups of the data, and then we've got backups of the backups, and data is just going crazy. And to have all of that up in the cloud for everybody to access and on-prem for everybody to access, it's very expensive, it's very time-consuming, and Store Simple just gives you a really cost-efficient way to have the most frequently accessed stuff close by, and the stuff that's not as frequently accessed up in the cloud. Everybody can still get to it, but it just gives you the best of all worlds. And if you can build this infrastructure, you're really going to minimize your costs, maximize your flexibility, and that's really what hybrid cloud is all about. So very cool stuff, Keith.
Yeah, absolutely. And your comment on being a SQL Server developer touched on another common use case that I see in the enterprise space, and that's that many enterprise customers have relatively robust development teams internally in their organization for writing internal line of business applications, customizing applications or whatnot. And there's been quite a few studies that have been done that the best way, one of the best ways, of really accelerating the productivity of in-house development teams is by giving them access to production quality development infrastructure, development VMs and tooling and whatnot. And when you think about that, in the on-prem world, it's incredibly expensive to do that. No one wants to approve costs for building out the equivalent of an entire data center just for development work, right? Because of the cost involved. And so as a result, in the on-prem world, development teams are often relegated to this is the hardware that we just migrated off of. Now you guys in the development team can have this, right? And as a result, they're always sometimes several years or several cycles behind what their applications actually run on when they move to production. Well, what public cloud technologies like Azure can do is they can provide on demand, when developers need it, access to production quality, production speed environments that are pre-built. In fact, in Azure, we've got a really cool offering around Dev Test Labs that allows you to put management policies around those development VMs to be able to automate and control things like when they get shut down automatically to save on costs, and how they get spun up, and be able to create standard images that have all the development tools the developer needs pre-integrated. That's another common pain point for development teams is I get a new PC and it takes me 3 days to get all the development tools that I use installed and working in the way that I want. Whereas in Dev Test Labs, you can have that as a templated process that can spin up in minutes when a developer needs it, spin it back down when they don't need it, and save on costs. So we're seeing a lot of excitement around enterprise customers where they've moved dev workloads out to the Azure cloud, because first, it gives them the ability to then take all that infrastructure that was being used for running dev workloads and use it for something else that's more production impactful. And secondly, it gives the developers access, in many cases, to much better hardware capabilities in the cloud on demand at a much lower cost than they ever had access to before, so that they can improve their productivity and accelerate their release cycles for new code that they're developing, new features and applications that they're developing.
Right. Now that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's a proven fact that the faster you can make those iterations for developers, the more productive they can be. And if they have to sit and wait on something to build and be deployed and for tests to run, if they're idle for 5 minutes, you lose your train of thought, you're not in the zone anymore. If it's just like boom, 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 productivity goes through the roof. And a productive developer is a happy developer. So that's very cool. The cost savings is really cool too. I mean, most people have to buy hardware thinking that, we've got to pay for this all up front and it's going to sit here even though it's only going to be used 8 to 10 hours a day. With Azure and being able to have your dev test stuff in the cloud and shut it down and only pay for what you use, so only pay for 8 to 10 hours a day, big cost savings, big performance savings, very cool stuff, Keith.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, gosh, it's been a longer than normal episode, but we had so much cool stuff to talk about. I'm really thrilled with just all the stuff we got to mention here. Hybrid cloud is big, and there's a reason why everybody's talking about it, because there's just so many advantages to having that on-prem infrastructure connected to your cloud infrastructure, the cost savings, the agility. It's all worth it, like Keith said. So I guess that'll wrap it up here. Keith, awesome episode. Thank you so much for your knowledge and participation in the show. Once again, if you want to learn more about Windows Server, go to aka.ms/ORCA. That's the OEM Reseller Community Academy, where we host all of these videos along with content that you can download to learn more about the technology, to learn more about the SKUs, the licensing, all that good stuff. That'll do it. Thank you very much, Keith. We'll see you next time, audience, on OEM TV.